Look up at the sky right now. What do you see? One sun, maybe some clouds, the ordinary backdrop of everyday life. Now imagine waking up tomorrow and seeing 3 suns burning in the heavens. Impossible, right? A hallucination, a trick of the light. Except people all over the world have been recording exactly this phenomenon in recent years. Strange halos around the sun, multiple luminaries appearing where only one should be. Atmospheric distortions that scientists struggle to explain with their usual talk of ice crystals and light refraction. And here is where it gets truly unsettling. This exact sequence of events, this specific pattern of celestial chaos, was documented before, not last year, not last century, but in 1552, in a book that vanished from history for nearly 500 years and has only recently resurfaced from the shadows. A book that reads less like a medieval manuscript and more like a survivor's field guide to the end of the world. For centuries, this document remained hidden, its location unknown, its very existence questioned by those few scholars who had heard whispers of it. Then, just a couple of years ago, it suddenly appeared, republished, digitized, made available to the public for the first time in living memory. The timing of this emergence is itself suspicious. Why now? Why, after half a millennium of silence, does this testimony from the past suddenly demand to be heard? The official name is the Augsburg Book of Miracles, but that title is a lie, a comfortable misdirection, because what fills its pages are not miracles in any spiritual sense. They are catastrophes, systematic, detailed, terrifyingly specific catastrophes that follow a pattern, a sequence that anyone paying attention to our modern world might recognize. The preservation of this book is the first mystery that needs to be addressed. Ancient manuscripts don't survive 5 centuries looking like they were printed yesterday. Parchment decays, ink fades, pages crumble to dust in the relentless march of time. Yet this folio, allegedly from 1552, looks suspiciously pristine. The colors remain vibrant, the details sharp. It is as if it was stored in conditions that shouldn't have existed in the medieval world. Climate-controlled archives, sealed environments, the kind of preservation technology that raises an obvious question. Where exactly was this book kept? Who had access to it? And why was it deemed necessary to hide it from general view until our current era? The contents offer a potential answer. Unlike typical medieval manuscripts filled with religious texts, prayers, and tedious household records, the Augsburg book is almost entirely visual. The words are sparse, almost an afterthought. The real communication happens through images, and these images are not the allegorical representations of biblical prophecy that scholars want to dismiss them as. They are documentary. They are specific. They show a world being systematically destroyed by forces that the artist clearly witnessed but may not have fully understood. And the level of detail is what separates this from fantasy. This is not the work of imagination run wild. This is the work of someone trying desperately to record what they saw before the memory of it could be erased. Let's start with the fire. The chronicle documents cities engulfed in flames, but not the ordinary fires of the medieval period. Not the accidental blazes from overturned candles or the deliberate burnings of warfare. What is depicted is total thermal annihilation. Entire metropolises consumed by fire so intense, so all-encompassing, that stone itself appears to melt. The flames don't spread building by building as normal fire does. They appear simultaneously across vast areas, creating a wall of heat from which there is no escape. The people in these images aren't fighting the fire. They are running from it, seeking shelter behind anything that might provide a barrier between their bodies and the source of the heat. This behavior, this specific response, tells us something crucial. The fire wasn't coming from the ground. It was radiating from above or from all directions at once. This is the signature of a thermal pulse, the kind of effect you would see from an aerial explosion or an energy weapon. The medieval world had no framework for understanding such things, but the artists drew what they saw. People hiding behind trees not because trees stop fire, but because they block radiant heat. The physics of this disaster are all wrong for the time period, yet here they are, documented with frightening accuracy. Following the fire, the chronicle records something even stranger, objects falling from the sky. Now, you might think hail, and yes, the artist uses that word, but look at what is actually depicted. These are not ice pellets. They are massive solid objects of impossible size crashing down with enough force to demolish buildings and crush anyone caught in the open. And here is the detail that should make every skeptic pause. Many of these falling objects have markings on them, distinct patterns. Some show clear images resembling lion heads or heraldic symbols. Ice does not form into complex artistic shapes. Ice does not carry insignia. What the artist is showing us is not a weather phenomenon. It is debris, possibly from something that broke apart in the atmosphere, possibly from something that was destroyed in orbit. The objects fall mixed with water, creating a bombardment that turns the ground into a cratered wasteland. This is not medieval exaggeration. This is precise observation of a specific type of destruction that the modern world would recognize as an impact event or orbital weapons deployment. And then comes the water, floods that surround the buildings that somehow survived the fire and the bombardment. But these are not river floods or storm surges. The water appears with the force of a tsunami, yet the chronicler notes that the sun continues to shine brightly overhead. How does a flood happen under clear skies? The answer becomes clear when you understand that we are not looking at isolated events. We are looking at a sequence, a pattern of destruction that follows a specific order. First, thermal processing from above. Then, bombardment with solid objects. Finally, massive displacement of water, possibly from the shock waves of impacts, possibly from gravitational disturbance of the oceans. This is a systematic cleansing of the surface, and the buildings depicted in the flood scenes show something peculiar. They are not just damaged, they appear sliced, as if cut by an enormous blade. Masonry that should last millennia crumbles like sand. This level of structural failure suggests seismic activity or gravitational stress far beyond anything natural to Earth. But if these earthly catastrophes seem impossible to explain with medieval understanding, they are merely symptoms. The true cause is documented in the sky, and it is in these celestial observations that the chronicle stops being mysterious and starts being terrifying. Because what the artist recorded in the heavens is a phenomenon that turns our entire understanding of histories inside out. The celestial anomalies begin in 1401, according to the book's dating system. A massive object passes across the night sky, but the sky itself is wrong. It is described as unnaturally dark, a black backdrop that obscures the familiar stars. This is not a comet. Comets were well understood omens in medieval culture. This is something else, something large enough to block out portions of the sky as it moves. The artist depicts it with the careful attention of someone who does not understand what they are seeing, but knows it is important to record accurately. And then come the machines. Here is where the chronicle crosses from disturbing into impossible. The sky fills with objects that have no business existing in 1552. We see cylindrical forms, massive and metallic, hovering without visible means of support. We see disc-shaped objects, the classic flying saucer form that would not become a cultural icon until the 20th century. How does a medieval engraver know what a disc-shaped aerial vehicle looks like? How does he know the aerodynamic profile that our own engineers would not develop for another 400 years? The skeptical explanation is that he didn't, that these are merely artistic interpretations of clouds or atmospheric phenomena. But that explanation crumbles when you look at the consistency of the forms, the mechanical details, the clear depiction of constructed objects rather than natural formations. These machines are not alone in the sky. They operate in formations, geometric patterns that speak of coordination and intelligence. Glowing spheres line up in precise rows. Complex mechanical devices maneuver among the clouds. And the reaction of the people below is telling. They do not fall to their knees in worship. They do not interpret these objects as divine intervention. They scatter in panic. They hide. They watch with expressions of fear and confusion. This is not the response to a religious vision. This is the response to a physical threat, to technology so far beyond their understanding that it might as well be magic, yet they recognize it as dangerous. In ancient Indian texts, the Mahabharata describes vimanas, flying chariots of the gods used in a great war that destroyed cities with weapons as bright as 1,000 suns. Perhaps what we are seeing in this medieval chronicle is not the first time such things appeared in Earth's skies. Perhaps this is documentation of a recurring event. The presence of these machines explains the nature of the destruction below. If what is hovering in the atmosphere are not natural phenomena but devices, Then the fires, the bombardment, the floods, they all take on a different character. They stop being random disasters and start looking like a deliberate process, a cleansing, a reset, and the artist is documenting not an act of God, but an act of war. Yet even the machines are not the most disturbing element of what fills the sky, because alongside the mechanical devices, the chronicle records something that pushes us into territory where science and nightmare become indistinguishable. The atmosphere over these medieval cities is populated by creatures that should not exist. We are not talking about symbolic representations of sin or allegorical demons. The descriptions have weight, physicality, biological detail. Giant reptilian forms fill the air, creatures that the chronicler identifies as dragons, but not in the fairy tale sense. These are described as having flesh and blood. They interact with the physical world in violent, tangible ways. Multi-headed serpents resembling the mythical Hydra are shown attacking settlements. Fiery breath and powerful tails are used as weapons. The depictions show these creatures causing real damage, real casualties. This is not religious symbolism. This is documentation of an encounter with a form of life that does not fit into our biological categories. And then, impossibly, there are fish. Marine creatures swimming through the air as if the atmosphere had become an ocean. Long eel-like bodies, writhing tentacles, forms that belong in deep water trenches, all moving through the clouds with the same ease that birds would show. Before you dismiss this as pure fantasy, consider that in recent decades, researchers have documented strange aerial phenomena they call rods or skyfish. Elongated entities captured on high-speed cameras moving through the air with undulating motions exactly as the medieval artist depicts. Were these creatures always in our skies, invisible to the naked eye, only becoming visible during periods of atmospheric disturbance? Or does the very density and composition of the air change during these catastrophic events, allowing life forms from other mediums or other dimensions to briefly exist in our world? Presiding over this chaos, the artist places a figure that defies easy interpretation. Not the traditional Christian God surrounded by angels, but something else. A being positioned in celestial space, surrounded not by heavenly hosts, but by strange beasts and incomprehensible machinery. Next to this figure is a construction described as a double wheel, a detail that immediately recalls the visions of the prophet Ezekiel. Wheels within wheels, covered in eyes, mechanisms of impossible complexity. Below this observer, lions fight under strange cross-shaped objects, while dirt and destruction spread across the land. The entire scene looks less like divine judgment and more like a control room, an operator monitoring the progress of an experiment or an invasion. The mixture of living creatures, mythical archetypes, and mechanical precision creates an image of complete cosmological breakdown. The orderly universe has been replaced by something fluid, something where the boundaries between categories have dissolved. But all of this, the monsters, the machines, the destruction on the ground, all of it is merely prelude, the true horror. The phenomenon that the artist returns to again and again with obsessive focus is what happens to the sun itself. Because you can hide from monsters, you can run from floods, but when the fundamental mechanics of the solar system begin to fail, there is nowhere left to go. Starting in 1533, the chronicle documents an impossibility. The appearance in the sky not of one sun, but three. Mainstream science will tell you this is a parhelion, an atmospheric optical effect caused by ice crystals refracting light, rare but understood. Except the frequency with which the artist records this phenomenon goes far beyond rare. It becomes the dominant theme of the later entries. In 1549, three suns again. In 1550, the same. Each time depicted with increasing detail, showing not just the luminaries themselves, but complex systems of rings and halos surrounding them, geometric patterns that look more like orbital mechanics than atmospheric distortion. And then, in 1573, the phenomenon reaches its apex. 5 suns blaze simultaneously in the sky, creating an illumination so intense that it becomes impossible to distinguish day from night. Impossible to know which direction is east or west. Imagine living under such a sky. Imagine the psychological impact on a population whose entire sense of time and direction depended on a single reliable sun. The biological rhythms of every living thing would be destroyed. Agriculture would become impossible. Madness would spread, like a plague. But the multiplication of suns is only part of the celestial breakdown. Accompanying these luminaries are objects whose nature remains deeply unclear. In 1509, the artist depicts what is described as a burning log next to the sun and moon. This elongated, cigar-shaped form hangs in the void, glowing with inner fire or reflected light. It defies gravity. It possesses none of the characteristics of known celestial bodies. In modern ufology, such shapes are often associated with massive spacecraft, motherships deployed during large-scale operations. Dark spheres appear around the suns like parasites drawing energy from the stars. Misty clumps and strange arcs create the impression of a vast grid or net deployed in space above the Earth. The sky has become a construction site or a battlefield. The insistence with which the artist returns to the theme of multiple suns is what transforms this from curiosity to warning. This is not a random collection of observations. This is a chronicle of escalation, a documentation of the approach of something massive. The pattern matches too closely with ancient legends from cultures all over the world. Chinese mythology speaks of a time when 10 suns rose in the sky, scorching the earth until a hero shot down 9 of them. South American traditions describe epochs that ended when extra suns appeared and boiled the oceans. These are not independent inventions. They are cultural memories of the same event, filtered through the different languages and belief systems. And the Augsburg Book of Miracles stands as potential confirmation that these myths describe real astronomical catastrophes that occur on a cycle. If we strip away the assumption that ancient people were primitive and superstitious, if we treat their records as observation rather than invention, a pattern emerges. Every few thousand years, something enters the inner solar system, something massive enough to distort light, to create gravitational chaos, to drag debris fields behind it that bombard planetary surfaces. The multiple suns are not illusions. They are the visual signature of this intruder's approach, the way its mass and energy interact with our star and atmosphere, and all the other phenomena documented in the book: the bombardment, the atmospheric creatures, the machines. They are either effects of this cosmic intruder or the response to it by intelligences who recognize what is happening. This brings us to the theory that unifies every page of this disturbing chronicle, the hypothesis that official academia refuses to seriously consider, but which alternative researchers have been developing for decades. We are talking about Nibiru, PlanetX, the massive celestial body described in Sumerian texts as having an orbit that periodically brings it into the inner solar system with catastrophic results for Earth. If the Augsburg Book of Miracles is documentation of such a passage, then everything makes sense. The sequence of destruction follows a predictable pattern. As the massive body approaches, its gravitational influence begins to stress Earth's tectonic plates, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. This explains the fires, not from burning buildings, but from fissures opening in the ground, from pyroclastic flows, from atmospheric ignition caused by electrical discharge on a planetary scale. As it draws closer, the debris field surrounding it begins to interact with Earth's atmosphere. Meteors, asteroids, possibly even artificial objects in decaying orbits, all rain down on the surface. This is the bombardment phase, the hail that isn't hail. The gravitational stress reaches a peak. Ocean waters are pulled from their basins. Massive displacement waves circle the globe. This is the flood under clear skies. And finally, at the closest approach, the very light of the sun is distorted by the intruder's mass and energy field, creating the illusion or the reality of multiple suns burning in the heavens. In this framework, the appearance of unknown craft and creatures is not supernatural, it is practical. If Nibiru, or whatever we choose to call this celestial body, is inhabited, if it carries a civilization that has learned to survive its long elliptical orbit through the darkness of space, then each passage near Earth would represent an opportunity to observe, to harvest resources, to interact with or intervene in the development of the species living on this more stable, more temperate world. The machines are their ships. The creatures could be their weapons, biological tools designed for specific functions. Or perhaps the atmospheric disturbance created by the passage allows entities from other dimensions or densities to briefly manifest in our reality. The veil between worlds becomes thin during such events. But here is what matters. If this book is a chronicle of such a passage, if it documents the full sequence from first astronomical anomalies to complete civilizational collapse, then it is not history. It is prophecy. Because cycles repeat. Orbits are predictable. If this happened in 1552 or whenever the real date of these events was, and if the same thing happened in the deeper past when Chinese legends speak of multiple suns, then it will happen again. The pattern will complete, and we are being told, by those who recorded it before, what to look for. The warning signs. This is where we must return to the present, to the strange atmospheric phenomena that people have been recording with increasing frequency in recent years. Sundogs and light pillars that appear with disturbing regularity. Unexplained aerial objects that governments are finally, grudgingly, admitting exist. Gravitational anomalies that scientists cannot explain. Seismic and volcanic activity, increasing globally. If you know the pattern, if you have read the manual, these are not random events. They are the early stages. The opening moves in a sequence that has played out before. And yet, despite the importance of this testimony, the Augsburg Book of Miracles was hidden. For how long, we cannot be certain. The date of 1552 stamped on its cover may itself be a deception, a way of pushing the events it describes safely into the distant past where they can be dismissed as medieval superstition. There is a darker possibility to consider. What if this book was created much more recently, perhaps in the 1700s or 1800s, documenting events that occurred not in deep history, but in the immediate past of its creators? We know that the late 18th and early 19th centuries were periods of massive historical revision, when the current timeline was solidified and alternative chronologies were suppressed. Many suspicious documents surfaced during this period, books allegedly ancient but in suspiciously good condition, containing knowledge that seemed too advanced for their claimed era. If we follow the logic of the reset theory, which appears throughout alternative historical research, the sequence becomes clear. A global catastrophe occurs. Civilization collapses. The survivors, traumatized and scattered, gradually rebuild. But those who come to power in the New World have an interest in controlling the narrative. They cannot allow the population to remember what really happened, to understand that everything they thought was permanent can be swept away in a matter of years or months. So, the history is rewritten. The timeline is extended backwards to create the illusion of stability and continuity. Any records of the actual event are gathered up, locked away, or destroyed. The Augsburg Book may have been one such record that escaped the purge, hidden by someone who understood its value, preserved in secret until conditions allowed for its controlled release. But why release it now? Why allow this testimony to reach public awareness in our current era? Perhaps because the cycle is approaching its return. Perhaps because those who possess this knowledge recognize the signs and have decided that some portion of humanity should have access to the warning. Or perhaps the release is itself controlled opposition, a way of inoculating the population against the truth by presenting it in a form that can be easily dismissed as conspiracy theory. By allowing this book to circulate in alternative research circles, while mainstream academia ignores or ridicules it, the information is neutralized. Those who might take it seriously are already marginalized. Those who trust official sources never encounter it. The truth hides in plain sight, simultaneously revealed and concealed. What cannot be disputed is the consistency of the message across multiple sources. The Augsburg Book is not alone. There are other documents from this same period that official history has trouble explaining. The legend of Prester John, supposedly a letter describing a mysterious Christian kingdom in the East, contains descriptions of mechanical wonders that read like science fiction. Automatons serving at tables, self-propelled vehicles, giant mirrors for observing distant lands. Technologies that should not exist in the medieval world, but which are described with the casual familiarity of someone documenting everyday reality. These texts are dismissed as utopian fantasy, creative exercises in world building. But what if they are survivor accounts from the pre-catastrophe world? What if they describe the technologies that actually existed before the reset, written by people trying to preserve the memory of what was lost? If we accept that our civilization is built on the ruins of something greater, if we acknowledge that we are not the first to reach advanced technological development on this planet, then everything changes. The megalithic structures that we cannot explain or replicate are not primitive achievements, but the remnants of the previous cycle. The myths of gods and monsters are not invented fairy tales, but distorted memories of real events and real technologies beyond our current understanding. And books like the Augsburg manuscript are not religious texts or artistic expressions, but databases, instruction manuals, warnings left by those who witnessed the collapse and desperately wanted future generations to recognize the signs when the cycle came around again. The warning is clear. The sequence documented is specific. It begins with celestial anomalies, with changes in the sun and the appearance of unknown objects in the sky. It escalates to atmospheric disturbances, to weather that behaves in impossible ways. Then come the impacts, the bombardment from above. Seismic activity intensifies. The oceans rise in massive displacement events. And finally, if the source of the catastrophe draws close enough, the very stability of the planet is threatened. Magnetic field disruption, gravitational stress, possible pole shifts. Civilization as we know it cannot survive such an event. Everything resets. The cities are buried. The populations are scattered. The knowledge is lost. And after a period of darkness, the survivors begin again, building on the ruins without understanding what they are building upon. But this cycle is not inevitable. Or rather, the astronomical event may be inevitable, but our response to it does not have to be. If we recognize the signs, if we prepare, if we preserve the knowledge rather than suppressing it, then perhaps the next passage does not have to mean complete civilizational collapse. This is the purpose of the warning. This is why the book was preserved, not to generate fear, but to provide information, not to cause panic, but to allow preparation. Look at the sky. Pay attention to the sun. Notice when the atmospheric phenomena become too frequent to be coincidence. Watch for the increase in seismic activity, for the changes in animal behavior that precede major disturbances. The manual has been provided. The sequence has been documented. Those who have eyes to see can read the signs. And when you see 3 suns burning in the heavens, you will know that the time has come. You will know that what happened before is happening again. And unlike those who came before us, unlike the people depicted in terrified flight on the pages of the Augsburg Book of Miracles, we will not face it blind. We have been warned. The question is not whether the cycle will return. The question is whether we will recognize it when it does. The chronicle is complete. The testimony has been given. The rest is up to us.